Welcome back. Tonight's story is about a woman who watched her mother smile through 11 Thanksgivings while cashing her disabled brother's checks behind a locked drawer, and then walked into a federal field office on a Tuesday morning with the deposit history no one knew existed. Pour the coffee. Stay close. My mother stole 11 years of my brother's life. Last spring, I was the supervisor who pulled the file. My name is Marlene Hatcher. I am 45 years old, I live in Akron, Ohio, and for the last 9 years I have been a field office supervisor for the Social Security Administration. I am the woman in the gray cardigan behind the bulletproof glass who tells you your appointment is at 10:15 and please have a seat. I have signed off on thousands of representative payee accounts. I have approved thousands of recovery referrals. And on the second Sunday of March, I opened a kitchen drawer in my mother's house in Canton and found 11 years of bank statements held together with a green rubber band. The drawer smelled like old coupons and cinnamon gum. The refrigerator was humming the way it had hummed when I was 9. My hands went cold before my brain caught up. I stood there for a long minute, listening to my mother laugh in the next room about a casserole. I have spent my whole adult life telling strangers that the system catches people like her. I did not know I would be the one who had to prove it. Before we begin, take a breath. This one is going to stay with you. We grew up in a brick ranch on Fairlane Drive with a concrete porch and a sycamore tree that dropped seeds into the gutters every October. From the street, we looked like the family on the church directory cover. My father, Wendell Hatcher, sold commercial insurance and wore a tie clip shaped like a small fish. My mother, Janet Hatcher, taught Sunday school for 26 years and kept a binder of every casserole recipe she had ever served at a funeral. My brother Dean was born when I was 4. He came early, he came small, and he came with a hole in his heart and a brain that would never quite line up with the rest of him. The doctors used careful words. Janet used different ones. She called him slow when company was not over. She called him a project when company was. She told the women at coffee hour that the Lord gives the hardest children to the strongest mothers, and the women would touch her arm and say, "Janet, you are a saint." I learned early that being a saint to strangers and being a mother at home were two different jobs. Dean was sweet. That is the part I need you to hold on to. He hummed when he ate. He loved the Weather Channel. He kept a shoebox of bottle caps under his bed and could tell you which gas station each one came from. He called me Marley Mar until the day I stopped letting anyone call me Marley at all. My father died of a stroke in 1998, the spring I turned 17. After the funeral, my mother stood in the kitchen in her stocking feet and said, "Well, we will just have to be tougher now." She said it like a recipe, tougher, as if grief were a seasoning you added to the meatloaf. The next morning, she canceled Dean's speech therapy because, in her words, he needed to learn to use the words he already had. That was the first warning. I was too young to know it was a warning. The second came 2 years later. Dean was 15. He had saved $140 from birthday cards in a Folgers can on his dresser. My mother took it for what she called the household. When he cried, she told him a real man does not cry over money he did not earn. She said it the same way she said pass the salt. I went to college in Columbus on a scholarship and a prayer. I came home for Christmas in 2003 and noticed Dean had stopped humming. Something was rotting under that brick ranch on Fairlane Drive. I just did not yet know the shape of it. In the fall of 2012, Dean had a seizure in a grocery store parking lot and was finally evaluated the way he should have been evaluated at 6. The doctors used the phrase intellectual disability with a developmental component, and they recommended he apply for supplemental security income and Social Security disability. My mother, who had cried at the diagnosis the way people cry at weddings, took the paperwork home and went very quiet for about 3 weeks. Then she came out of that quiet with a plan she said was almost kind. She told Dean she would handle everything. She told him the government was complicated and she did not want him worrying. She told me on the phone that she had been appointed his representative payee by the court and that the checks would come to her so she could budget for him. She used the word budget the way some women use the word blessing, softly, repeatedly. She said it would only be until he got on his feet. Dean was 30. He was never going to get on his feet the way she meant it. I was 29 and 3 years into my Social Security career, working a service window in Cleveland. I should have asked more questions. I should have asked to see the court order. I should have asked why she suddenly had a new car. But she was my mother, and Dean was safe in her house, and I told myself the system would catch anything that needed catching. I was the system, and I missed it for 11 years. In May of 2013, the court issued an order naming Janet Hatcher as representative payee for Dean Hatcher, with a directive that the payee status be reviewed if and when another suitable family member became available. In November of 2019, I drove down to Canton on a Saturday and signed power of attorney paperwork in my mother's kitchen so I could help with Dean's medical appointments. I filed my copy in my office safe. I assumed she filed hers with the agency. She did not. The payee account stayed in her name. The checks kept coming to her. And in the spring of 2021, when Dean's hands started shaking too much to butter his own toast, my mother called me crying and said she just could not do it anymore, and would I please take him. I drove to Canton that night. I packed his bottle caps into a plastic bin. I moved him into the spare bedroom of my house on Glenmont Avenue. He was 41 years old. He had $9 in his wallet. He owned 2 pairs of pants. When I asked him where his savings were, he looked at me the way a child looks at a parent who has asked a trick question. And he said, "Marley Mar, Mama keeps all of that. Mama keeps me safe." I want you to picture his face when he said it. 41 years old, trusting her the way a 5-year-old trusts a streetlight, saying the word safe like it was a thing you could hold. I went into my bathroom and I ran the water so he would not hear me cry. I told myself she must have it in a savings account for him. I told myself there must be a reason. I told myself 100 small, soft lies, because the alternative was a door I was not yet ready to open. The door stayed closed for almost 2 more years. If you have ever had a family member turn cruelty into a quiet routine and call it love, drop a 1 in the comments. I want to know I am not alone in this. What opened the door was a casserole dish. It was the second Sunday in March of last year. My mother had invited me to Canton for what she called a family lunch, which in her vocabulary meant she wanted something. Dean was at home with my husband Russell, watching the Weather Channel and eating the grapes I had cut in half because his hands still shook. I drove down with a tin of brownies and a stomach that already knew something was wrong. She asked me to grab the gravy boat from the bottom drawer next to the stove. The bottom drawer was warped. It had been warped since 1994. You had to lift and pull at the same time. I lifted. I pulled. The drawer came out farther than I expected, and the contents slid forward, and on top of the gravy boat sat a stack of bank statements held together with a green rubber band. The top one was dated February of that year. Direct deposit from the United States Treasury, $943. Account holder, Janet M. Hatcher. Memo line, SSI. I stood there in her kitchen with my hand still in the drawer. I could hear her in the dining room laughing about a casserole the way she used to laugh about Dean's bottle caps. The sycamore outside the window was bare. The refrigerator was humming. And somewhere underneath all of it, I could hear my brother saying, "Mama keeps me safe." I took the rubber band off. There were 132 statements, 11 years, every single month. I did not say anything at lunch. I ate the green beans. I complimented the rolls. I asked her about the church ladies, and I let her tell me the same story about Mrs. Drennan's hip surgery I had heard 4 times already. When she walked me to my car, she kissed me on the cheek and told me she was so glad I had finally come home for a real visit. I drove back to Akron with the statements in a manila envelope on the passenger seat. I did not turn on the radio. I did not cry. I have learned over a lifetime of being Janet Hatcher's daughter that crying is a thing you save for a room with a locked door. When I got home, Russell was making grilled cheese for Dean. Dean was humming along to a tornado warning from somewhere in Oklahoma. I kissed the top of his head, and I told him I loved him, and then I went into my office, and I closed the door, and I opened my laptop. I did not call a lawyer first. I did not call my mother first. I did not even call my supervisor first. I logged into the secure agency portal. I pulled Dean's payee file. I read the 2013 court order. I read the 2019 review note that said the payee status was unchanged. I read every single annual accounting form my mother had submitted in her careful Sunday school handwriting, swearing under penalty of federal perjury that she had spent every dollar of Dean's benefits on Dean's care. Then I opened a blank recovery referral form. I typed in his social security number from memory. I typed in hers. I attached a scan of the first and last bank statement from the green rubber band. I wrote a one-paragraph summary in the calmest English I have ever written in my life. I clicked Submit. The form went to the office of the Inspector General at 11:47 p.m. on a Sunday. I sat in the dark for a long time after that. I thought about the Folgers can. I thought about the $140. I thought about the way she had said a real man does not cry over money he did not earn. I thought about Dean's $9 in his wallet the night I brought him home. Then I went into the spare bedroom and I sat on the edge of his bed and I watched him sleep. He was 44 years old. He still slept with one hand under his cheek. I whispered, "I am sorry I was late." The OIG investigator was a woman named Patricia Voss out of the Cleveland Regional Office. She was 61, she wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she had been doing payee fraud cases since before I graduated high school. She called me on a Tuesday morning. She did not waste a single word. She said, "Ms. Hatcher, I have your referral, I have the bank records, and I have already pulled your mother's tax returns. I would like to come to Akron on Thursday and talk to your brother in his own home, with you present, in a room he feels safe in." I cried in my office for the first time in 9 years. Patricia came on Thursday. She sat on the floor next to Dean's recliner so she would not be taller than him. She asked him about his bottle caps. She let him show her every single one. After 40 minutes, she asked him very gently if he knew that the government sent him a check every month. He looked at her, and he looked at me, and he said, "Mama keeps that for me. Mama keeps me safe." Patricia wrote that sentence down word for word. She underlined the word safe twice. The forensic accounting took 11 weeks. The total came back at $141,860. None of it had been spent on Dean. There was a 2015 Buick Encore. There was a screened-in porch. There was a timeshare in Hilton Head. There was a CD ladder at a credit union in North Canton with my mother's name on every rung. There was also, and this is the part Patricia called me about on a Friday afternoon in June, a separate savings account at the same credit union, opened in 2014, in the name of a granddaughter who did not exist. My mother had used my middle name and a date of birth 2 years off from mine. She had been quietly seeding a college fund for a fictional child, while her real son ate the grapes I cut in half. I sat down on my kitchen floor when Patricia told me. Russell found me there an hour later. He did not ask. He just sat down next to me. The federal indictment came down in late September. 11 counts of theft of government funds, 1 count of aggravated identity theft for the fictional grandchild account. The local paper ran her Sunday school directory photo next to the headline. The church ladies stopped bringing casseroles. She called me 41 times before I picked up. I picked up on a Tuesday evening in October. I was standing in Dean's room. He was at his weekly bowling night with the day program Russell and I had finally enrolled him in. The one my mother had told him for years was for, in her words, the lower functioning ones. He had a shirt with his name embroidered on it. He had a team. He had a small gold trophy on his dresser from a tournament in August. My mother was crying when I answered. She said, "Marlene, please, you have to tell them it was a misunderstanding." She said, "Marlene, I am your mother." She said, "Marlene, what kind of daughter does this to her own mother?" I let her finish. I watched the porch light flicker the way it had flickered the night my father died. I thought about the sycamore on Fairlane Drive. I thought about the Folgers can. I thought about a 41-year-old man saying, "Mama keeps me safe." And then I spoke, very quietly, with the same calm I use behind the bulletproof glass. I said, "Mother, I was the supervisor who pulled the deposit history." I said, "I have your handwriting on 132 federal accounting forms swearing you spent every dollar on him." I said, "You taught me when I was 17 that we would just have to be tougher now." I said, "You told a 15-year-old boy that a real man does not cry over money he did not earn." I said, "Dean did not earn that money. He suffered for it, and you took it from him while he sat in your back bedroom calling you safe." She started to say something. I did not let her. I said, "The only thing you have to do now is the only thing you ever taught me." I said, "Be tougher." Then I hung up the phone, and I unplugged the porch light, and I went to pick my brother up from bowling. If you have stayed with me until now, thank you. Tell me in the comments what part of the story stayed with you the most. I read every single one. I drove home from the bowling alley that night with Dean in the passenger seat. He had won 3rd place. He was holding a small plastic ribbon in both hands, the way you hold a baby bird. He was humming along to a weather report on the radio about a cold front moving in from Indiana. I looked at him at a red light on Market Street. I thought about the 4-year-old girl who used to call him Dean Bean and who waited for him on the concrete porch on Fairlane Drive while my mother taught Sunday school inside. I told that little girl in my head the only thing I have ever needed to tell her. I told her, the people who were supposed to love you took what they could and called it a lesson. That was never your shame. That was their inventory. You were not unwanted because you were unworthy. You were unwanted because they were empty, and empty people steal from the full ones and call it budgeting. I told her, your brother is in the seat next to you and he is safe now, and you are the one who made him safe. Not her. You. The light turned green. Dean held up his ribbon and said, "Marley Mar, look. 3rd place." I said, "I see it, Dean Bean. I see all of it."